Well, hey, everybody, it's Dr. Ben and my favorite person in the world, Dr. Erik, my brother.
Hey, guys.
So this is a thrilling episode of Christ-centered chiropractic, just because, one, we're announcing a big event, two, because I'm doing with my brother, Dr. Erik, and three, just, we haven't sort of officially announced that Dr. Erik is one of our coaches now. So Dr. Erik, Dr. Rob and I are coaching each of our clients at Christ-centered chiropractic. Dr. Erik's always everybody's favorite speaker at the seminars, and along with our other Dr. Ray Omid, who's just an anchor. Probably Dr. Ray is, Dr. Erik, and maybe you can comment on this too. At any given time, you and I have been coaching for over 20 years, and at any given time during that period, there's always some ultra stud. There's like one doctor, or four or five that are clearly the best in the profession. Like magic is happening, something supernatural is going on where, it's like, hey, how'd your talk go? Oh, there was 700 people there. How many new patients? Oh, like 1,000 came in, like they're getting these kinds of numbers, insane results. And that's really Dr. Ray Omid right now, from what I've seen in our profession. Any thoughts on that?
I got to hear Dr. Ray down here in Orlando, and so I had never met him, never heard him. And when he was speaking, what you see is that you have some people who are struggling at the bottom, and there's stuff they have to work through. And then there's some people who are already at the top, and they're decent too. Then you have the people who are in the ramp, right? The rocket thrusters are going, and they're just on their way to the top. And that's the person you want to hear from. And that's really what I got from Ray. Ray has not reached the pinnacle of where he's going yet, but he certainly is on the way. And that's an amazing thing to be able to hear from and be a part of.
Yeah, and since I've got you on, I really want to focus on, because again, we have a combined about 45 years of coaching experience. We've together taught, at least 2,000 seminars between speaking to doctors and speaking in our communities, probably spoken, 100,000 times, 200,000 times combined. I'd have to do the math. And so as we talk about what, something you can get out of this webinar itself to absolutely transform your life and your practice, as well as why you just can't miss coming to this event in Michigan that's coming up here. The date is April 22nd through the 23rd. The thing I wanted to focus on first, and you and I didn't prepare for this, so I'm kind of dropping a bomb on you, but get ready, is we do this to save lives. So, so we talk about a Dr. Ray, whoever is this person who at any given time, like you said, is either about to just explode. They just have something amazing in the holster, or they're already there and they're just crushing the numbers. It always comes down to, yes, the process is important. Yes, the procedures are important. All that's critical, adjusting skills, leadership ability, but there's something in them that has decided, I've got to save the world. I always say the best evangelists, the people that have brought virtually millions, not virtually, literally millions to Christ, or the people who are saving the most lives at the biggest practices and don't know what to do with the abundance of wealth coming in, the abundance of new patients. Like there's so many new patients, you have a problem like that. A lot of people would love to have that problem, but this is a real thing for these top doctors, as well as obviously the volume and these freakish results, where people are, cancers are falling out of their body when they get adjusted. It's this sense that people are perishing now. Like I've got to act now. So here's kind of the bomb that I was going to drop on you. So our story is always tied very much to the fact that when our dad was young, and we were obviously, we're a very close family. You and I, our brother Rich, who's also a chiropractor, our mom, really tight-knit family. For those that don't know the story, we're going on a cruise together the next day. Dr. Erik and I were working together. So Dr. Erik's at my clinic, and we get a call, and it's my brother Rich who says, Dad just went down on the lawn. And Dr. Rich, at 18 years old, tried to save my dad's life. And so for us in chiropractic, we understand that's always almost the case, that people are perishing. We must do something now. There's an urgency. So people that sort of urgency that are trying to save lives now before somebody's dad dies now, have massive practices, no issues with new patients. People do not have objections. They don't bring up their insurance. They don't say it's too much money. It just doesn't happen. Same thing with people with massive rocking churches. Those that know that they want to stop people from perishing for all eternity, and that there's only a moment that we have right now that we must act upon before we lose the next million people forever. They're aggressively trying to build their church and bring people to Christ. And those people have mega churches where some pastors struggle to even keep the church open, to keep the lights on. They're working part-time. I know pastors working part-time, painting houses, working at Chipotle, doing everything they can to earn a living for their family because their churches are dying. And yet you talk to like people I've worked with, like Christ for All Nations with Reinhard Bunke, where no matter what they do, where they go, there's 1 million people show up, and yet some churches can't get 30 people to show up. And it's all this, again, it's this intensity, this urgency, this desire to save lives now.
Yeah,
So Dr. Erik, yeah.
I was gonna say, there's also, so when I first came out of school, I went and worked for Ben, and this was like at the very beginning of Ben's ministry in coaching chiropractors. So he didn't have a coaching program, but there was a group of us young doctors who were all over Central Florida, and we would meet at Ben's office once a week, twice a week, we used to do back in those days, and we would train. Ben had just ramped up his practice to 1,000 a week in a ridiculously short amount of time. So he was doing what we were just talking about. And he's and then he's teaching it to these young people, including myself. And I remember I used to, when we would train, we'd stand up in front of the group, and Ben was like, okay, let's hear you. You're in an exam room with a new patient. Let's hear, what are you going to say? And we were scripted, right? So we were all saying the same words, but I knew the words. I had practiced them a lot. So I knew them. So I would do mine, and Ben would just say no. And then I would do it again. He'd be like, no. This was going on for months. And so my practice also, when he's saying no, there's just something missing. It's just not there. My practice wasn't doing anything either. And then, at some point, all of a sudden it was yes, that same words, right? So the words didn't change, but all of a sudden something changed in me and the way it came out, that all of a sudden it was yes. And then my practice ramped. So I think this is that click, right? This, when I said Ray is in that, he's in that Zoom period right now where it is just pouring out of him. He'll be worse when he gets there, right? He's best right now. Something happens in your heart, in your mind, where you just understand what Ben just said. So you could go out and talk about how our dad died and people are dying and I want to save lives and I need to make a difference. It won't do anything until the message, that information, that message, hits your heart, hits your soul, and it's more than just words. And I think that's where training comes in. That's where coaching helps. That's where being at, so getting to the seminars, getting to the conferences, if you get to Michigan, you've got to be immersed in it. You have to feel it, because if you don't feel it, if it's not real from your heart, it is just words. And so it's tough. It's a tough point for me to get across right now. I might be blowing this completely, but just the fact that it has to mean something, it has to reach you and touch you. And then the same words you've always said will be, that'll be that rocket fuel that Ray's going through right now.
Yeah, and you're not blowing it. It's a tough point to get across, which is how do you get across that extra something BJ was talking about? So so you go do that adjustment, nothing happens. Ray comes in, or you and I come in who are on fire for Christ and want to save the life. We make the same adjustment and get a radically different result. Now, how do you explain that? It's this extra something that is sort of undescribable. That's this abstract factor that we believe is supernatural, as we're talking about Christ-centered chiropractic. Now, I want to get into my dad's chiropractor, our dad's chiropractor, for a second, because I think this illustrates the point. It's the reason I brought this bomb on today to go through with Dr. Erik, because we sent him to a chiropractor like probably lots of other chiropractors. And my dad had a bad low back, it hurt him, but his entire spine is subluxated, as you'd imagine. My dad did not take good care of himself. He smoked Camel No Filter, where a man belongs, was their old slogan for many years. He was overweight. and he had really bad forward head posture. As a chiropractor, looking at pictures of my dad years later, I'm like, wow, that is some serious forward head posture. So obviously a badly subluxated cervical spine. So my dad went in with his low back pain. This chiropractor just began to crack his low back. There was no spinal analysis. Why look at his neck? It doesn't hurt. And the second or third visit that dad went, that he get there, and there was just a sign on the door, and he had an appointment. The sign on the door that said, explained that he had an opportunity, the chiropractor had an opportunity to go skiing. And so the practice was closed that day or that week without even alerting the patients. My dad went back once or twice more, had, more low back cracking. I think the guy was closed again one time. And eventually my dad, just disappointed in chiropractic in general, that was it for his chiropractics. That was my dad's entire chiropractic career. And the reason we're sending my dad there is we both don't live there. We live out of state. We want my dad's life saved. And no mention, by the way, of, again, his upper cervical spine, his forward head posture, no mention of his lifestyle, the many medications my dad was taking, nothing, just some low back cracking, not trying to save my dad's life. I know that practice failed. I know that doctor no longer is there. He went out of business, and my dad died because that lack of passion, the lack of compassion, the lack of urgency that people are perishing wasn't there. And so he failed. And probably if you asked him, he'd have an excuse like bad insurance, bad location, bad presidents, something in the economy. He probably has a reason that he's failed, but the reason I know he failed is because of my dad.
Yeah, and by the way, that doctor we sent him to was a classmate of mine. So the reason why we sent him there was that I'd been adjusted by that guy in school, and he was a great adjuster. I mean, he was a big, strong, he was like a bodybuilder. And so that guy could move a bone, right? But that special something, again, that power behind the adjustment, it is the supernatural. I mean, we probably all have examples of this, but you have people come in and see you do an adjustment that is no more than, it's just an adjustment, right? There was nothing special about the adjustment itself. And the person is like, they have the miracle after your adjustment, right? It's like, why that one? Well, I've been to all these other chiropractors. Like, well, I didn't do anything that was like fancy or crazy good. I just did an adjustment, but it's where it came from that made all the difference.
Yeah, and that obviously the essence of Christ-centered chiropractic. I've had people say, why Christ-centered chiropractic? Why bring Jesus or God into all of this? And it's exactly what you just said, Dr. Erik. It's because where the adjustment's coming from really makes all the difference. I've had people go to top level clinical people, and you and I are. I mean, I'm certified in a number of techniques, clear certified, CBP certified, went through all 8 CBP certifications with Papa Harrison back in the day. So we are highly technically sound, but it's because we have that plus the supernatural that makes a difference. Another quick story. I'd love your feedback on this one. So I've been part of the Billion Soul Initiative since 2003. And now, in fact, we now call it the Global Church because we already went well past saving 1 billion souls. And the very first event I went to, it was Campus Crusade had partnered with James Davis, who's a patient of mine, by the way. Dr. Davis, who started the Billion Soul, drives an hour and 40 minutes each way to see me every single week for the last 18 years, never misses a visit. Sometimes I'm out of town and he's bugging me, texting me going, when can you squeeze me in? But he never misses. So he gets this. But at any rate, the very first Billion Soul Initiative, there's a guy named Bill Bright. And John Maxwell said of Bill Bright that he has brought more people to Jesus than anyone on earth since the Apostle Paul. So that's how big Bill Bright was through Campus Crusade Ministries. But Bill Bright was dying. He was in the hospital and his lungs were shutting down. He was down to like 10% lung function. So he couldn't come to his own event that he put on. There was 5,500 pastors there. And it was so big that Mel Gibson himself came to give us the first ever viewing of the Passion of the Christ. So imagine that. So, and in the green room, I'm hanging out with, just the who's who. I'm there with Sheriff Walker. I'm there with
Chuck Norris.
Chuck Norris. Yeah. So, he's reading Body by God in the back while we're hanging out. It was just this incredible event. But here's what here's what Mel Gibson said about Bill Bright, who again built this massive organization. If you've ever been to the Campus Crusade campus out there in St. Cloud area, it's massive. I mean, it was a huge global ministry. It still is going to this day, years past Dr. Bill going to be with the Lord. And so Mel Gibson said this, he goes, I got there, he goes, he could barely breathe and barely keep his eyes open. I bent down, you know, to say hello, and he looked over me and he couldn't believe it's Mel Gibson. He says to me, do you know Jesus? Can I pray for you? And that blew Mel Gibson's mind. He goes, here's a guy, as Mel Gibson put it, wasn't doing so hot. And yet all he could think about was me, how I'm doing in my salvation. Here's a guy that wants to reach one more for Jesus. If there's one more soul I can save, I don't care that you're Mel Gibson. And Mel Gibson, you know, hadn't gotten himself in as much trouble back then, so he was still a beloved, famous, you know, global icon. And yet all he cared about was his salvation. He cared about his soul and just wanted to help one more person make it to heaven. Wasn't concerned about the fact that he was going there himself any second.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I had a few years later, because of Ben, Ben got me in where I was able to go to another one of their conferences, and I also got back into the green room, and I was introduced to Chuck Norris also, and he gave me one of those handshakes where he like grabbed my hand and like scooted me by and like right out of the way. So Chuck had no time for me. But you know, I was something that I was thinking of that related to this too is just I was in church this past Sunday, and in the church we're going to, you know, people have been still doing it from home. So they're not really there, right? They're on Zoom, but they're not there. And so there's something missing, right? There's still something missing to that connection and that message. And at the service this past Sunday, the pastor was looking into the camera for the home people and was just like, it's time, you've got to come in, right? So the Zoom thing's been good for a season, but you've got to come in now. The power is here. And so, you know, just the idea of being at the conferences, right? Or, you know, making sure you're on these Zoom calls and being involved, you know, being on your coaching calls. But I think the group coming together is important, right? So, you know, I'm new to CCC itself, so I'm not sure what the typical show rate is at the conferences. Ben, you know more than me on that. But it's time to come in, right? So we got to be together, and again, I think that's how you get to that point where it's oozing out of you, and people can tell, right? And that's where the miracles will come from.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say, then Eric, if you got anything else to say, you know, you can help us wrap it up here. But there's a client we worked with at CCC, and really smart guy, great guy, a good chiropractor. But his practice, as happens to a lot of doctors over a couple of decades, when he joined us a year ago, his practice was going down. You know, so he's been at it 20 years. You know, a lot of that, what it used to be like, and back in the heyday, you know, he's younger than me. It's not like he's some old man, and he's talking about, like, you know, back, you know, during the Depression era or something, about how his practice used to be and where his finances used to be. And so he's joined CCC because he wants to ramp it back up. But a year has gone by and he hasn't come to a single event. And what's happened is that we've had these very pragmatic, procedure-based sort of discussions, and his practice is doing a lot better. It's up about 50% from where we started. He's making a lot more money, but he never got the juice. Like, he never got the actual supercharge or real power to take it all the way. You know, so it's been a year. We're going into our second year. And I just said to him, like, you know, it's great that you've put in the procedures. It's great that you've got a new mindset. It's great that you've been refreshed and you're renewed, and you're not looking at practice life like, you know, you're in the winter of your career anymore when you're in your 40s. But that thing is still missing. You know, you got to get to the conference so we can infuse into you heat, you know, power. Something I'll just end with here that many of you may have heard me share before, but I was listening to him again this morning. I'm a Reinhard Bonnke junkie. So if I find anything on YouTube with Reinhard Bonnke in it, I listen to it, and I'm probably on like round 2 or 3 of getting it, because there just have been few like him. And the other thing that's unique, not only is he iconic, that organization has brought, I think it's 85 million people to Jesus at this point. In fact, John Maxwell may probably change the statement from Bill Bright to Reinhard Bonnke, bringing the most people to Jesus since the Apostle Paul. And so, here's a guy that when he would do a conference anywhere in the world, they'd go to the most remote villages where maybe 500 people live in this village in Africa, and 30,000 people show up because they walk and, with their donkeys and with their cows and horses, and they come into the village from all over the region just to hear the word of God come out of Reinhard Bonnke's mouth. They don't even speak the language. And so just these amazing crusades all over the world. And I got to know Reinhard during his prime. It was just an amazing thing to be around. And I'll say something that, just because it's so simple, but always worth reinforcing, that when I did get to corner him, I was part of a church that was struggling. And I didn't know how to build churches at the time. I just knew pastor's pretty good, worship's pretty good. I don't know why the church only has, 100, 200 people coming, but I know it struggles. And here's a guy goes into a field, takes a bunch of tractors and knocks down the trees, and 1 million people show up. There are people who are watching him from literally 300-400 yards away, looking at this little tiny person on the stage. So I asked him, what's the difference? You got, not only are you filling fields up with people all over the world, but people are just kind of healing, like they're passing, like wheelchairs are being passed up through the crowd. People are leaving piles of canes and medications everywhere. Blind eyes are seeing, deaf ears are opening, the dead are being raised. Like, this is happening in mass at the Crusades, and they're not even praying for anybody. Just through the preaching and the power and the presence of God, people are being healed. People get healed during the announcements at these crusades that he was doing. And now Daniel Kalenda continues the work and does an amazing job. But I asked him, so what's the difference? My church can't even get off the ground, and you got millions coming to see you. And he always gives this very simple metaphor. He goes, well, listen, if you want to warm up a pot of coffee, do you put it on a cold burner or a hot burner? If you want to see massive success, you got to have a passionate fire for Jesus Christ. You got to know that people are perishing and have that same fire for chiropractic. Dr. Erik?
Very powerful. Just want to say in the end here, I'm excited to be a part of CCC now. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to speak with some of you guys one-on-one on the phone. I think the thing that I hope that I'll bring to the group is that, and sometimes I'll look at, and I shared this in Orlando a little bit the last seminar, but sometimes I'll look at Dr. Ben or Dr. Rob, and like many of you might think, you look at them and you're like, well, yeah, they made it. Look at them, right? Those are two superhuman individuals. I'm a normal guy. I'm every guy, right? So, the fact of the matter is that when you got it, right, when you get what Ben is trying to get across, Dr. Rob's getting across, when it reaches your heart, you can pull this off. My practice and my career has been way better than it should have been, right? A guy like me shouldn't have the practice and the career that I've had. But it's the fact of the matter is that I could do it, right? I did do it, and you can too. And so I think for some of you who've ever felt like, I'm hearing from them, but of course it's them. I'm looking forward to speaking to myself because you and I might be a little bit more alike, and you can do this.
Well, Erik's also the most beloved chiropractor in the history of chiropractic. So he does have that going for him, certainly in Central Florida. Well, guys, again, let's make sure you're there. We're April 22nd, 23rd in Michigan at the Gilead Healing Center. Just the center itself is worth the trip, not to mention really the greatest lineup I've ever seen. So bless you guys. Thanks, Dr. Erik, for being on the team. And everybody, remember who you are.
Bye-bye.